So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this first series of webinars about the World Congress on Conservation Agriculture that are being hosted by FAO and ICAF. It's a pleasure for us that so many colleagues from around the world has joined today. And it's my pleasure to welcome as well our speakers and FAO colleagues. And I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Fenton Bede, who is team leader at FAO. So Fenton, please.
Thank you, Emilio, and welcome to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So this is the first in a series of webinars on conservation agriculture in collaboration with the European Conservation Agriculture Federation. And it's in preparation for the 8th World Congress on Conservation Agriculture. So very briefly, I'll introduce myself. I'm the team leader for rural, urban, cropping and mechanization systems in FAO, and we are housed in the Division of Plant Production and Protection. The team promotes sustainable crop production, optimized through technologies and agribusinesses that enable farmers to produce more while conserving the natural resource base and minimizing pesticides and fertilizers. Focuses on diverse cropping systems in rural and urban areas, including mechanization services and protected cultivation. You'll hear more later on the Global Programme for Sustainable Dryland Agriculture, which has just been approved at the Committee on Agriculture by our member countries of FAO. And this provides a clear focus for the adoption of sustainable crop production practices in the world's drylands. So what do we mean by sustainable when we talk about crop production? There are three criteria. The first is income generation, the second is environmental protection, and the third is social equity and the creation of decent jobs. The agronomic practices to achieve sustainable crop production include conservation agriculture. Now, I'm sure you're all aware, because you're here, that these are based on the three key principles of 1, minimizing soil disturbance, minimizing tillage, 2, having permanent soil cover by mulch or cover crops, and 3, diversification of crop rotations and crop associations. Further information is available from the ICAF website and also from FAO's website on conservation agriculture. In brief, conservation agriculture is now adopted by on over 180 million hectares that make up 12.5% of the annual cropland. Most of the farmers benefiting from conservation agriculture are smallholders, and 50% of the area where conservation agriculture is being implemented is in developing countries. And NSP, our division, in collaboration with other divisions, partners to provide technical support on the adoption and promotion of conservation agriculture principles and practices to our member countries. In this regard, we have several partnerships, with ICAF being at the forefront, but also we partner with the likes of CIMID, ICADA, African Conservation Tillage Research Center of China, and financial institutions to implement conservation agriculture. And this includes the World Bank and IFAD, and we also partner with a number of NGOs to achieve scaling. I'd sincerely like to take this opportunity to thank ICAF for the close collaboration with FAO on raising awareness and promoting conservation agriculture. And as a step towards this is the first in a series of webinars to increase awareness of conservation agriculture and to better prepare for the 8th Congress on Conservation Agriculture, which is in Switzerland next June, 2021. In addition to the webinars, FAO and ICAF will also carry out 5 regional technical consultations, which will be formulated around roundtable discussions with lead experts in Euro-Asia, Middle East, South Asia, Africa, Central and South America. And again, the purpose is to share information on conservation agricultural technologies and to update the global status of conservation agriculture. Now for today, the agenda and the way that we're organized, as you've seen, Emilio is our moderator. We will then have our guest speaker, and then we will also have comments from 2 FAO staff. First of all, Afis Miminjanov, and then Joseph Keensley, and then we will have a discussion. Now, please try and participate in the discussion. And the way to do this is by entering your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. So enter any questions you have as the presentations have been provided in the Q&A box, and this will be addressed towards the end in our final discussion. So without further ado, we'll move on to the main event, which is the presentation, Profitable and Sustainable Farming with Conservation Agriculture, the Future of Farming. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Professor Gottlieb Basch, who holds a doctor's degree from agricultural sciences from Georg August University, Göttingen. And his studies in Portugal have led to the adoption of conservation agriculture and the formation of APASOLO, which was the Portuguese Association on Conservation Agriculture. He has investigated alternative land use and soil management, and this has kicked off research and farm-based experimentation in Portugal. As a professor at the University of Évora, Portugal, and researcher at the Mediterranean Institute for Agriculture, Environment and Development, Gottlieb has been working on many aspects related to the implementation of conservation agriculture. Recently, he's been involved in 3 EIP focus groups and in 3 Horizon 2020 projects and ER Africa projects. Gottlieb has been president of the European Conservation Agriculture Federation between 2002 and 2008, and then again since 2011. So it's my great pleasure to hand over the floor to Gottlieb. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fenton, for your nice words and the introduction, and also how this will work, this webinar. And I won't lose time now. Also welcome all participants in this webinar, first webinar on the main theme of the World Congress to be held next year. Well, you all know it was supposed to be this year, but due to the known reasons, we had to postpone it until the next year. So I guess I'm now being the host, and which allows me to share my presentation, which I herewith do. So I guess you all see now my screen. So this is actually the main theme of the World Congress next year, Profitable and Sustainable Farming with Conservation Agriculture. Well, very briefly, the history of the World Congresses so far. Many of you will know all those or have been present at those congresses. It started all off in 2001 when ICAF together with FAO organized the first World Congress in Spain. And then we had several other events. First, it was on a biannual basis, but then it shifted to a tri-annual basis. And well, the last one was in Rosario, Argentina in 2017. And well, now we are back in Europe. Why we are back in Europe now? Well, first of all, it has to do with a presentation of ECAF at the last World Congress. We presented a bit in order to bring the World Congress back to Europe. We saw in this an opportunity to raise awareness about the deliverables of CA in Europe, where it's extremely important to raise this awareness, where we also find several constraints and serious constraints for CA adoption. I will come back to it later. We wanted to have it in Central Europe to facilitate the gathering of important stakeholders in Europe, within Europe. And we also wanted to get some, let's say, backwind from the international CA community in order to achieve a broader understanding and acceptance of CA also in Europe. But in any case, it's a World Congress, and we will address global issues, not only European issues, but it will help also to, well, to foster the implementation of CA in the, what I call it, developing continent Europe with regard to CA. Also, why in Switzerland? Well, ECAF challenged its national associations to, well, to host the Congress. and our Swiss colleagues kindly accepted this challenge. We know that we have there excellent conditions, not only landscape-wise, as you can see on the right hand of this slide, but also Switzerland is a showcase of how agricultural policy can help CA adoption. We saw this in the past, and so it could also be shown and can be shown to others. It's a central place in Europe, we all know, and we also will have the possibility to provide a high CA diversity around in surrounding countries for post-Congress tours. So that's why in Switzerland, the organizing committee, well, it's ECAF together with a Swiss No-Till Association, in close and strong collaboration with FAO and also the Bern University of Applied Sciences. We also have other partners and support from other important institutions, ACT, the African Conservation Village Network, the School of Agriculture, Forest and Food Sciences, Havel in Bern, the Italian Ministry of Agriculture, the Canton Bern, and also recently we got the support of the LIFE program, a European LIFE program, which many of you may know. Now, why this main theme for the 8th World Congress on Conservation Agriculture? Well, Dr. Fenton Beat already mentioned it, what sustainability means. Well, you may find it redundant to call this profitable and sustainable farming. Because profitability and the economic aspect is already within the sustainability context. But we wanted actually to highlight the economic aspect because for many, sustainability is mainly addressing ecological issues, eventually social and human issues, and often the very important need to be profitable is forgotten. That's why we wanted to highlight this in the main theme, and we want to show how conservation agriculture is capable to achieve this. And because we are very strongly convinced that CA is the only ecological and regenerative agricultural model capable to bring together, to conciliate profitability of farmers and the environmental protection, and at the same time deliver the great number of ecosystem services that are soil mediated. And of course, above all, and recently more and more important, also to address climate change mitigation and adaptability. And this altogether satisfies or would satisfy the demands of civil society. For that, we want to showcase how conservation agriculture, when compared to conventional farming, is capable of addressing the pressing challenges and the most important challenges society, not only agriculture, but society is facing. And these are certainly soil threats leading to the degradation of farmland. It's about water efficiency, addressing water scarcity, erratic rainfall events, excess water, lack of water. It's the response to climate change, both with regard to mitigation, but also adaptation. We need highly productive systems at the same time to address and sustain the demand of the production of food, feed, fiber, and fuel. And last but not least, we have to be profitable to avoid abandonment of farming activity and also to make farming attractive again to the younger generation. So let's go through then to through the soil threats. One of the biggest one all of us know is erosion. A recent publication of the Joint Research Center of the EU and the European Soil Data Center tells us that soil erosion globally is occurring at a rate of 43 gigatons per year. And imagine in Europe, it's only 1 gigaton per year. I don't know whether you can imagine how much of soil is 1 gigaton, but I can tell you that if you take the area, the surface of Belgium, which is 30,000 square kilometers, and you take 2 centimeters of topsoil away from the whole surface of Belgium, then you have 1 gigaton. And in addition, and also an important resource for agriculture, which is phosphorus, the same source refers that 50% of the total phosphorus losses all around the world are due to water erosion. So it is a huge problem and we need to address it. And you see here where the millions and millions of topsoils are going into the sea. This is a satellite picture of UK, and this was in 2014. In February, you see here the dark color of the where the rivers enter the ocean. And well, once I showed this slide to an official in Brussels at the Commission, well, and he said, well, it looks like UK is bleeding, and it definitely is bleeding. But as long as there are opinions that consider this sediment transport into the sea as beneficial, whether for preventing coastal erosion, whether for providing nutrients to marine life, then I think, well, it's really hard to convince people. And we all know where all this starts. It's in the field. It's in the agricultural fields that are intensively tilled, that are unprotected to the rainfall. And you see here what is happening. It's particle detachment, it's crusting, it's starting runoff, and the bigger the slope, the more disastrous will be the event and the more soil is lost. But we also know how to prevent this. You see here the same field, the same slope, and the same crop. Could you ever imagine on the right-hand side what is happening on the left? I can't. Another threat, decline in soil organic matter, which means decline in soil fertility. You see here two cases. One is Europe on the left. It's a map that was developed within the Smart Soil project, which was a framework program 7 project. And they actually identified the major risk zones throughout Europe. And you see a lot of areas have medium and high risk. Sorry, okay. On the right-hand side, you see a publication, a slide, a graph from a publication from Dr. Rajkowski, which many of you may know. And it actually appears that the decline of soil organic matter is a natural law, a law of nature, that cultivation must lead to soil organic carbon depletion. Even adding, in some of the cases here, even adding organic matter, manure, they were not able to stop the decline and the depletion of soil organic matter. And you see it's around 30, 40, and 50 and more % of the initial soil organic matter that is lost over decades of intensive cultivation. So what to do about that? The same we also can find, and it's known also in Europe, that soil organic matter is declining, is steadily declining. On the left-hand side, you have the situation in Belgium. Within a period of 22 years, you see the increase in the percentage of arable soils considered short in organic carbon. All soil types are showing this decrease in soil organic matter. The same happened also within a time span of 15 years only. In UK, you see on the right-hand side, Soils with high organic matter are declining, where the soils with lower soil organic matter are increasing. So this is definitely an issue. But what is most astonishing to me is that IPCC is actually recognizing that the land use, long-term cultivation based on full tillage and medium carbon input levels is or has led to the decline of soil organic matter. For example, here in dry temperate regions, 20% of the initial carbon stock has been lost, and in moist regions, even 31%. So far, so good. But on the same table, further down, IPCC is looking to what is going on in the future, and they apply a management factor to see what is going on, to calculate what is happening in the future. And to my disgrace, actually, or to their disgrace, you see, if we continue full tillage, then the change is 1.0. That means no further change is expected if we continue full tillage. I don't know whether they think that we already reached the bottom line in terms of soil organic carbon, because they actually allow or admit that reduced tillage or no-till is capable to improve soil organic matter over time. But they won't admit that if we go on practicing tillage, full tillage, that we are still continuing declining soil organic matter. This is, for me, extremely concerning. Regarding soil biodiversity, well, all are talking now about, well, soil is a living organism, and we have to preserve soil biodiversity. And recently, FAO also launched this YouTube video clip alerting to the need to preserve soil biodiversity. Unluckily, however, the video clip only refers to deforestation, monoculture, over and misuse of agrochemicals that degrade soil health and cause biodiversity loss. It has still written somewhere, sustainable soil management is needed, but it does not outspokenly address tillage as one of the main causes of soil biodiversity decline. This is actually a pity, because we must educate society and consumers that not only over and misuse of agrochemicals is a bad thing, but also that tillage is a practice to avoid. Well, this is one of the slides I always show my students, asking them what habitat they would prefer if they were an earthworm. Well, of course, on the right-hand side, in a region where once or twice a year an earthquake of magnitude 8 or more with several aftershocks is occurring, is not actually a nice environment for an earthworm. Neither would it be for us. On the left hand, you find a very nice habitat, smooth, quiet, cozy. Well, forget about the mole. But what this means for the earthworm community, you can see here, two huge earthworms that I found once in a UK CA soil. And my colleague, or our colleague, Friedrich Tebrugge, also found and collected the earthworms he found under ploughing and under no-till. You see the difference in the amount of earthworms, which are a clear indicator of how we can improve soil biodiversity. Not only below ground, but also above ground, as you can see here in these photographs showing different species fostering under CA. Another problem, soil compaction. Well, we supposedly use tillage to improve and create better soil conditions. But have a look at this all these compacted layers are created by tillage implements. And then we wonder why the water won't infiltrate, as you can see on the right. Well, infiltration, coming to water efficiency, and here infiltration plays a major role. You see here this curves from a publication of John Landers, showing clearly what is needed, both no-till and cover, to improve infiltration rates tremendously. And we all know that over time, infiltration rates, the longer we have a field under CA, the higher the infiltration rate will be. But it's not only infiltration, it's also water storage. You see here two parameters, which is water holding capacity or field capacity on the one hand side, and available water capacity on the other hand. In both trials, we found a higher available water capacity, and the older the no-till conditions were, the higher is the available water capacity. The same we found here after 6 years. In a vertisoil, you see the available water porosity is much higher under no-till. So infiltration, storage, but also losses. How to avoid losses or reduce losses? Well, I think we all know from own experience that an uncovered soil under our feet loses much faster the water at the surface than covered soil. But are we aware how much water this could be? Well, I found once this publication showing that 100% soil cover could reduce evaporation losses by 41 millimeters. Well, multiply this by 1 hectare and you have losses of 400, or reduction losses of 400 cubic meters per hectare. And well, over the last years, I also tried to quantify the water savings that are possible when doing no-till and with a thick mulch layer. And you see here on the left-hand side that after 6 weeks of the beginning of the measurements, where the water amount of water was the same in conventional and no-till, but after 6 weeks, we had altogether already more 190 cubic meters per hectare in the soil. And the same we found over the winter and spring in rain-fed wheat, comparing conventional tillage and no-till. But if you don't want to measure, just open your eyes and see it with your own eyes, what is happening in terms of water losses. You see here on the right-hand side, half of the field has been conventional tillage on the right. On the left, we have conservation agriculture with mulch cover. And you see the development clearly of the corn clearly shows the losses of water on the right-hand side. And on the left, this was actually the trial I performed over the last 3 years. You see here the soil profile. They are literally next to each other. On the top, the pictures on the top show actually the treatment. Conventional, which is uncovered soil. On the left is a thick mulch layer. And it was really a sharp distinction between one side and the other. On the left, you have the dark, wet soil. On the right, you have the light, dry soil. So it jumps to your eyes. Now coming to climate change, mitigation. Mitigation means, first of all, creating a positive balance between gains and losses of carbon in the soil. Secondly, we have to reduce emissions, and on the one hand, CO2 emissions through reduced use of fossil fuels, and also the reduction of external energy demanding inputs. And finally, we also have the other two greenhouse gases, nitrous oxide and methane. How to create this positive balance? Well, just leave the residues on top of your soil and stop tilling. This was a compilation of results of long-term trials in several countries that was performed and compiled by Friedrich Tebrugge. And this is clearly showing the amount of soil organic matter we can sequester in our soils. And we did once, or recently actually, first for Europe, then for Africa, an exercise trying to to calculate the potential carbon sequestration potential if we transformed the area under arable crops that are prone to the use of CA from conventional to conservation agriculture. And you see here in the different geographical regions, the potential we have in case we achieved the sequestration that we found in literature under CA, the potential we have in annual crops and also in perennial crops in throughout Europe. So the potential is actually huge if CA was performed duly and leaving residues and stopping plowing. The same exercise we did for Africa. Here the potential is even bigger and the areas are also bigger. This is just to show that there are positive results in terms of sequestration, and we use these positive results and translated them to the area that could be transformed into conservation agriculture. Regarding emission reduction of greenhouse gases, well, CO2, we know less fuel, we need much less fuel for our operations. We can reduce external energy demanding inputs, namely fertilizers, pesticides, and machinery manufacturing, but also water transport. I showed how much water we could save actually. And finally, the other two, nitrous oxides and methane, we also can reduce emissions over time through improved drainage and reduced nitrogen inputs. That's no doubt. Regarding adaptation, this means we have to create higher resilience to extreme events of first, excess rainfall, causing runoff, erosion, landslides, drought, which means we have to have more water intake and retention, less losses and higher water use efficiency. And we also can reduce heat stresses, especially through thick mulch layers on top of the soil. We also are capable to lower losses in case of complete failure or disaster because our inputs are less. And finally, we can find a faster recovery after extreme events. And this is just a picture I took once. We took students to the field to show differences in soil structure in ditches we opened under conventional agriculture, this plot on the left-hand side, and under CA on the right-hand side. And the very same day we went there, we had an extreme rainfall event, and I went there again the day after, and you see what happened. The ditch here under conventional tillage is still full with water. The other one was empty. Finally, productivity. We know productivity is a function of soil quality and health. And astonishingly, I don't know whether you heard about that, in Europe, apparently wheat yields stagnated or started to stagnate at the end of the last century. Well, to me, it was astonishing, but well, many people immediately say, well, this is due to climate change. Because climate change is much easier to blame than soil degradation that we ourselves contribute to continuing tilling. You see here again another map which was produced by the Smart Soil project, calculating the combined effects of soil organic carbon reduction in terms of yields. So you see even the light green areas are showing yield reductions between 5 and 10%, and all yellow and the red ones are showing a much higher yield reduction in several crops. The same we can find and hear about it in Argentina. You see here, astonishingly, the area under corn was increasing only, well, slightly between 88 and 2001, but the productivity and the production increased, while at the same time the adoption of CA increased tremendously. And the same was the case in Brazil, where the area maintained more or less stable, while productivity and production went up, while at the same time reducing the inputs. But we found the same here in Portugal. You see here, we did once a field trial, response trial to nitrogen. And we used two adjacent fields. One was continuously cultivated conventionally on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, well, it was a field next to the other one where we practiced CA over many, many years. And you see, after 11 years of no-till and CA, we could increase the soil organic matter in the topsoil from 1 to 2%. And then we did this response trial to different rates of nitrogen. And you see here the picture on the left-hand side on the soil with 1% of soil organic matter. It's the zero nitrogen plot, whereas here on the right-hand side with the 2% of soil organic matter, we have also the picture in the background of the zero nitrogen plot. But here the zero nitrogen plot produced 2,500 kilograms, whereas here just over 600. And you see here we could reduce tremendously the input of nitrogen to achieve the economically highest yield, which is 3.6 tons here instead of 3.06 tons with much more nitrogen. So this is a clear evidence what we can do and improve in terms of soil health and its consequences for a higher productivity and profitability. And this is also a colleague of mine who is owner of 400 or 340 hectare farms in South Portugal, and he shifted drastically from conventional tillage to no-till in the beginning of 2000. And he did some monitoring of the cost reduction, and you see here the different items dropped down to altogether to the cost reduction was 58% altogether, combining labor, fuel, repair costs, and so on. So another clear issue. And this means we have to embrace the future of farming, meaning this means actually that we have to abandon and to leave what is here on the left-hand side, intensive soil disturbance, leave the soil bare. We have to abandon this practice and tell all society, farmers, policymakers, all decision makers that this is not sustainable, and sustainability and the future of farming is based on minimum soil disturbance, soil mulch cover, and crop diversity. So this is a clear message that must come out of our Congress, and we have to show this all over. And we all know that there is a lot to do, and there are so many approaches that are asking for sustainable approaches. But when it comes to implementation, well, they don't know how to achieve. But luckily, we know the answer. We have just to convince that our answer is the right one. So it was already mentioned that this was the first webinar of a series of several ones. We will announce this duly. So the others will introduce the other sub-themes of the Congress. I won't go on with this here. If you want to know more about the Congress next year in Switzerland, please visit our website. We have a new deadline for abstract submission, which is 31st of January. Well, of course, this must be 21 here, sorry. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gottlieb, for the presentation. Very comprehensive and I think addressing the key.
Took a bit too long.
Key elements for the World Congress. Now we move on, and I will give the floor to Dr. Hafiz Muminjanov that will present, I think, a very good news from FAO to all the participants. Thank you, Hafiz.
Yes, thank you very much, Emilio. Can you allow me to share my screen, please?
Yes, Gottlieb, you should...
Well, I already stopped, sorry. I think Julio should
host disabled participant screen sharing.
Mm-hmm. So, can you address, Gottlieb, can you address?
Sorry. I have to, okay. I have to make host. Sorry, you are now the host, Hafiz. It was still in my...
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, thank you, Emilio. And thank you, Emilio, for this opportunity, and thank you, Gottlieb, for the very nice and detailed, informative presentation. We understand that conservation agriculture, or CA, is an evidence-based and farmer-driven approach, and you very clearly described the economic, environmental, and social benefits of CA, and also refer to the ecosystem services provided by CA and CA contribution to mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So we all understand that CA should be combined and integrated with other agronomic practices, and in this regard, I would like to share with you some good news. So last week on the 2nd of October, the Committee on Agriculture, COAG, the 27th session of Committee on Agriculture, COAG endorsed the Global Program on Sustainable Dryland Agriculture. Maybe you know that Committee on Agriculture, or COAG, is one of FAO's governing bodies that provides overall policy and regulatory guidelines. Why this program was developed? Because the drylands represent over 43% of global area and are home for over 2 million people. About 90% of these people live in developing countries. Poverty, food insecurity, biodiversity loss, frequent droughts, and environmental degradations are increasing in drylands due to the climate change. Moreover, agriculture in the drylands is dominated by small-scale and resource-poor farmers. Monocropping, tillage-based farming system, and overgrazing have caused severe land degradation, soil erosion, and loss of fertility in drylands. Therefore, the Global Program on Sustainable Dryland Agriculture was formulated with the objective of improving food and nutritional security, livelihoods, and environmental sustainability in drylands through strengthening capacities of stakeholders and providing business opportunities. The program is the core component of the hand-in-hand initiatives of FAO and focused to low and mid-income countries with low capacity and with medium and long-term impact. The program has 4 thematic pillars and will use integrated, participatory, and evidence-based approach to upscale the outputs of innovative approach and successful research and development projects. In this regard, the gaps and needs assessments in drylands will be conducted through participatory process and using available information and GIS platforms. And the most promising technologies, innovations, and emerging technical and digital solutions will be gathered in a toolbox. Also, awareness will be raised on the potential technical intervention to promote sustainable agricultural production systems in the drylands. Further, to each country, to each agroecological zone, production systems and socio-economic conditions, the most suitable technologies will be selected, and adoption of these technologies will be facilitated through conducting practical and participatory demonstrations, validating of the outputs, monitoring and upscaling. These technologies also will be publicized through a web portal. The program further will support the development of appropriate policies and strategies for adoption and promotion of sustainable crop, livestock, forestry, water, soil, and fishery management in drylands under changing climate. If you look at this illustration, we consider the core for the toolbox will be 3 principles of conservation agriculture. As Gottlieb clearly indicated, and also Fenton described them in his opening remarks, the 3 key principles of CA are minimum soil disturbance, soil coverage by mulch or by cover crops, and crop diversity. So based on these 3 principles and integrated with other good agronomic practices like diversified production, integrated system, application of integrated pest management, using cultivation, protected cultivation, selecting tolerant crops and varieties, using high quality seeds, enhancing biodiversity, using better plant genetic resources, promoting sustainable mechanization, precision agriculture, and agro-robotics, we will achieve sustainable dryland agriculture. So here in this slide, we just present the suitable technologies and intervention, technical intervention. They could be collected in a toolbox, and here you may see the drip irrigation, usage of water boxes for growing plants in the marginal environment, using modern technologies like drones, like agro-robotics, planting different species, selecting of the tolerant crops and varieties, even protected cultivation, using mulch, plastic or organic matter, promoting of new crops, or snow trapping in the northern region, and all should these based on 3 principles of conservation agriculture. Thank you. For further information, you will directly contact me, and here is my email address. Thank you very much. Over to you, Emilio.
Thank you, Hafiz. Although we are running out of time, I think it's worthwhile to spend some time with the question and answer. So I apologize for the delay of the webinar, but I think it's worthwhile that we go through some of the questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer all your questions now, but we will try to download them from the system, and all questions will be answered and will be sent to all the participants. But in the meantime, let me bring some of the concerns of the participants, and please, Gottlieb, Hafiz, if you consider, you can reply. So first one is from Edward Gita. How can we influence policymakers to include CA in agriculture mechanization programs? Maybe Joseph Kinsley from FAO, you can answer. In East Africa, governments often promote tractors with disc plows. So how can we influence these policymakers?
Do you address me directly now?
Maybe Joseph, you can.
Well, it's all about raising awareness and actually specifically for Africa, we have, together with the African Union, with our partners like the African Conservation Tillage Network, we have been working very hard on a framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization specifically for Africa, with 10 key elements, and of which one of them is the use of sustainable crop husbandry practices that are based on conservation agriculture. But it's really true, it's very hard, because mechanization in the ears of many politicians and policymakers and decision makers means actually plowing. And specifically also because in Africa, the soils are very hard because of the long-term use of the moulbot plow and the disc plow, even the hand hoe. So yes, we have hard soils, and there's often the need for correction. And that's why normally we promote subsoiling, ripping. I mean, leaving the discs and go to the tined implements. That's a very important step towards reduced and then finally no-tills direct seeding. So it's a process. There's no quick fix, let's say, advice that can be given. It's a process. It's a learning by doing, and it's seeing what is changing with the soils.
Thank you, Joseph. To those questions about the presentation, all the materials will be shared with you and will be ready, available at the World Congress website. Another question is from Shagwad Jamil about compaction. What's the impact of conservation agriculture on the aeration of soil? I understand is compaction. Are there negative effects? Gottlieb, you addressed that during the presentation, but maybe you can stress on that.
Well, of course, compaction is a complex issue. First of all, if we shift to conservation agriculture, if there are already compacted layers in the soil, I think we have to do to break those compacted layers, and through eventually the use of a subsoiler. But after that, you should, under all circumstances, avoid further soil compaction. That can be done by having a thick mulch layer, which is reducing the compaction stresses to the soil. We have to avoid any heavy traffic under wet conditions, and over time through the root channels and also the earthworm channels, we can guarantee the sufficient aeration of the soils. But we have to avoid under any circumstances further soil compaction.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gottlieb. And a couple of questions are related to, as you can imagine, pests, diseases, and how crop residues affect those. So what can you tell about that, Gottlieb? Hafiz, if you consider.
Regarding diseases?
Pests and diseases, and how can we manage the pests and diseases under CA?
Well, manage. Well, there are a lot of pests and diseases. Some might be somehow favored through no-till and eventually through residues of the previous crop where pests can hide. But well, there must be an integrated approach, and I think it was shown in one of the slides of Hafiz. There must be an integrated approach, including crop rotations above all. And well, first of all, we have to do crop rotation, no doubt about that. Use different crops in order to avoid the buildup of the pest and disease pressure. There are other possibilities of integrated disease and pest management. For example, I was just answering a question regarding in tomato. How do you practice CA in tomato, where we have a high pressure of soil-borne diseases? Well, there are approaches using based on the use of mycorrhiza and the improvement of the mycorrhizal activity to help overcome this soil-borne diseases. So there are many possibilities, but each case is a different case, and it's not possible to give an overarching and a silver bullet for this kind of problem. But rotation is certainly a very important feature in crop diversity.
And Vesha Mandal is bringing I think a very interesting question, because we know conservation agriculture has 3 principles, and the question is it necessary to strictly adhere to the 3 principles to call a system CA? And if the owner of a land follow just 2 principles, can we say is he a CA practicing farmer or not? What do you think?
Well, this is a tough question. Of course, ideally and full CA is respecting the 3 principles. I know that it's not always possible, especially due to economic pressure. Often the crop diversity is left behind. We also have, in many cases, the competition for crop residues with livestock. So, but the issue is, if we want to harness fully the benefits of a CA system, we have to apply and do the best to apply all 3 principles. And often we hear about results that, well, may question the benefits of CA. But often, if we dig deeper, we find that, well, the results obtained were not actually obtained under a full CA system, but only a partial CA system. So, well, we know there are trade-offs in many senses and directions, but to harness the full benefit, we should stick to the full package of CA principles.
Some participants from India, they are asking about the perception that conservation agriculture may entail a huge amount of herbicide use. What can you tell about that?
Well, the question or the answer is actually the same. Crop rotation, diversity, effective soil cover to suppress weeds, and over time, you see you can somehow deplete the weed seed bank. It's a bit more difficult for sure with regard to perennial weeds, but still rotation and the combined application of different, again, integrated weed management approaches, which includes also herbicide, but not necessarily more herbicide than the under conventional systems. Sometimes it's only a shift from one timing of application to another timing, not necessarily an increase in the input of herbicide. But if well practiced, if well understood, over time we can reduce the weed pressure also without tillage.
And a question, I think this is for the FAO colleagues, because there is a question or a statement about sometimes different development agencies, sometimes they are promoting plowing, sometimes they are promoting no tillage. It's a question about coherency of approaches. What can you tell about this? And maybe the program you have just shared has a clear idea, but this is a real thing now.
Can I take it?
Please, Hafiz.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is very, very good. I mean, question from the reality, from the real life. Actually, we also, while working in some countries, we see different agencies. For instance, in one country, we were promoting CA, and another agency was buying a lot of plows and distributing free of charge those plows. And we, of course, raised this issue. But in this regard, we need to have more awareness raising to explain the importance of CA and its three key principles, but the main say should become from the country. The country should have the clear policies and strategies. The policy should be towards a promotion of no-till technology based on other two principles of CA, conservation agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafiz. And also some questions. Interesting one. Is conservation agriculture organic? Hafiz, you have also dealt with the
thank you very much. Actually, there was another question talking about negative or some, let's say, negative parts of the conservation agriculture. So people who practice conservation agriculture at the beginning, they may apply herbicide, but we were constantly repeating that if you follow three key principles of CA, then you will achieve the success. If you do not do crop rotation, if you do not apply mulching covering the soil, then of course you will face with more problems with weed infestation and you have to apply more chemicals. So here we have to focus on applying all three principles with integrated with other good agricultural practices, as was mentioned in our presentations.
Okay, thank you, Hafiz. Another question is about the climate change, soil organic carbon. A colleague says that how to improve carbon in subsurface layer of soil using CA. So it's clear it's able to increase in topsoil, but what can we say about that, Gottlieb?
Well, astonishingly, well, I also thought that, of course, enrichment of carbon is more likely to occur in the top soil layer. But the other day, I read a paper showing exactly the opposite. If the authors did not find differences between cultivation systems in the top layer, but found in the deeper layers favoring the CA system. And the explanation they provided was that, well, both higher biological activity, especially earthworms, are putting organic material down there, and also the macropores, the vertical macropores, are able to transport dissolved soil organic matter into deeper layers. So, well, they make the point that deep sampling is actually necessary to find where the soil organic carbon is going.
Thank you, Gottlieb. We have some question about the communication, and I will take Kari Clark's one. What activities are planned to provide more education to a wider public media, youth movements, or environment. It seems that only with strong and informed public support will policy change fast enough to make a difference in time for the looming disaster. And there are some other comments on that. I would say to Kari that we have on December the 3rd, we have another webinar, including information sharing and communication. But what do you think about this specific question? I would address it to our FAO colleagues, maybe, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, awareness raising is a very important step. Even in the global dryland program, we are considering to raise awareness to promote those technologies contributing to sustainable development of agriculture. We have establishing allies with the other UN agencies. For instance, last week we had online training with the Center for Sustainable Agriculture Mechanization on conservation agriculture and mechanization for Central Asia. We have lots of colleagues raising awareness, sharing their experiences through social media. Go to Facebook, go to YouTube, just type no-till, lots of information, and more videos are coming from the field. More farmers are converting from the conventional tillage to the no-till to the conservation agriculture. Lots of information is available already on the web. Also, we have a website. Fenton mentioned in his presentation that NSP, Plant Production and Protection Division, is hosting a website on conservation agriculture. We also assisted the partners to establish and to maintain the regional alliances and also the websites. For instance, we have similar websites for Central Asia. So lots of opportunities and information. And please also in every and each presentation, we leave our email addresses for you. Please contact, we share, we are ready to provide additional information for you.
Thank you, Hafiz. And some colleagues from Africa also. I mean, the conflict of living residues and water scarcity, sometimes also livestock, or how can we handle that that situation in those places? We need to leave residues on top of the soil. We need to feed the animals. What's the balance? What do you think?
Well, we once tried to get a proposal, a project proposal ready to address exactly this issue, and the name was feeding the soil and feeding the cow, not or feeding the cow. It's you have to feed both. Of course, the tendency of if you produce more biomass, then the tendency is often you invest in more animals. But of course, those farmers must also learn that they could benefit from both. They have to separate fodder production from crop production. And of course, I know it's a very, very difficult systems where farmers in some regions only have the right to harvest the crop, but after the crop is harvested, then the residues are for the rest of the community. So this is a very, very difficult situation. But we have to raise awareness that there must be both feeding the soil and feeding the cow. But without feeding the soil, you won't get the right answer.
Thank you. Joseph, please.
Yes, it is a highly sensitive topic, and I mean we must confess that we have a lot of free roaming livestock specifically in rural lands of Africa, and slowly this has to will have to change a little bit to have the cropland, and as Gottlieb mentioned, the crops a little bit separated from fodder production, and maybe confine the livestock to certain places for roaming at certain places only, and not in the crop fields. But I wanted to come back. I mean, we can see that conservation agriculture it's really multidimensional. We need a good agronomist, and being the sustainable mechanization expert in this round. It's also amazing what's going on with equipment innovations. I mean, the equipment is getting more and more intelligent and precise. I mean, a precise seeding line with a very narrow furrow opener and with press wheels for closing. That's it. You do not have to turn around 100% of the soil anymore. You have a lot of parts of the soil that keep being untouched, and that is I think the engineering part, the innovation part. And we also can observe that with CA, equipment is getting smaller again, but more precise. We don't need the large horsepower. The smaller horsepower tractors are good enough, which is an important message for specifically rural Africa, to start on a smaller and more precise way of mechanizing the way of farming.
Thank you, Joseph. And I will just pick maybe two questions more in order to finish at the 1:15. But I would not like to miss the pesticides and herbicides, and especially glyphosate issues. Some question about, we know that in Europe there is a debate on the glyphosate use, and Francisco Garcia Verde is asking about how do you see, Gottlieb, the future of Europe, the future of CA in Europe? It seems glyphosate is a taboo. And Marie Bartz is asking, how is FAO and other entities working on the pesticide issues, especially due to the image of farming for the common society? Any initiative, policymakers on the chemical industry? So first, Gottlieb, and then...
Well, I know that glyphosate is a very complicated issue, especially in Europe. And as I mentioned already in my presentation, unless society, consumers do not perceive that sustainability is only the achievement of the best compromise possible, that there are always trade-offs. Of course, we want to minimize trade-offs. That's right. But as we say in Portugal, I cannot have sunshine in the wheat field and at the same time rain in my cabbage field, which are next to each other. It's impossible. You have to find the compromise and the responsible use of agrochemicals, not the misuse, not the overuse, but the responsible use. We cannot forget about the achievements of science that helped us develop agriculture. Not only so many other things were developed based on innovations in science and also with chemicals. We have to use them correctly, and we have to educate consumers and society that tillage is as bad a thing as the mis- and overuse of agrochemicals. Society has to understand this, that all the erosion problems, all the biodiversity decline, as I mentioned, is mainly due to tillage, not due to the responsible use of agrochemicals. And if we do it correctly, as I told, we can even reduce the herbicide input and the pesticide input compared to conventional agriculture. And we also are trying to develop systems that combine organic with conservation agriculture. There are approaches here and there. I know a fellow in Austria who is doing a great job in this sense, trying to combine organic farming with conservation agriculture. We know, and they know, the organic people and the ecologists know, or a few of the ecologist people, it's more the organic farming community. They know of the benefits of CA, and they want to include CA into organic farming. So there are ways, but condemn it right away and just because, sorry, it is glyphosate, it is, well, from Monsanto, it's not a healthy approach. It won't us lead anywhere. we have to appeal for the responsible use of agrochemicals and educate people that we even do much worse with intensive tillage of the soil.
Thank you, Gottlieb. So, final question. It's Rolf, our friend Rolf Derbs is asking, what percentage of universities in Europe teach CA with no-till? And if it's mentioned. Rolf, we teach CA at Cordoba University. You'll accept my, we have a program. So and the university farm of the University of Cordoba is fully in no tillage and conservation agriculture. So hopefully we'll find more and more in the coming years. So thank you, and sorry for not addressing all the questions. We'll try to address them after the presentation, those not addressed so far. And I will leave the floor for Hafiz and Joseph for the closing remarks. And thank you very much for all the participants and all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emilio. So, thank you also, Gottlieb, for your inputs, for excellent presentation, and also to take this opportunity to thank all colleagues who participated actively for the time, for the interest, and for the very interesting questions raised during the discussion. And we will follow up with the questions, and we are sure that you will receive answers to your questions. So our next steps. So as it was mentioned at the beginning, these series of webinars are organized with the purpose of preparation to the 8th World Congress on Conservation Agriculture to be held next year in Switzerland. So today we had the first webinar. It was an intro. So we will have 4 more webinars, online webinars, and here you are the schedule. And all participants will be also informed in advance. You will receive invitations, and we will be very much looking forward to seeing you to the next webinars planned until the end of December. Moreover, we are also planning to organize 5 regional roundtable technical discussions. So with the experts, with the extension specialists, researchers, farmers who are promoting conservation agriculture in different regions of the world. So with this final conclusion remarks, if Joseph, you want to say? Give a floor to Joseph to also to say a few remarks to conclude the webinar. Joseph, please.
Yes, I'm really impressed about the very active participation in the question and answers and in the chat, and having over 150 participants. I think this event was very useful. We have to thank ECAF, Dr. Basch, and Emilio for the moderation, and we of course Fan for the opening. I think it's a good approach to basically. I note up to now the COVID-19 has not been mentioned, but here we go. I think COVID-19 is changing our way we communicate and we work together. And between now and the hopefully physical event of the next World Congress on Conservation Agriculture, these interactions will maybe help to thinking and brainstorming, maybe also for new initiatives, joint initiatives, programs in the different regions. And this very new dryland global initiative is absolutely a very good tool for that as well. So, I mean, some of the questions we're asking for, I mean, we need these umbrellas, like, for example, dryland or the tropical agriculture, or maybe the machinery innovations for CA. These are the special groups that we will have to go into topic-wise and maybe also webinar-wise. I think that's all I have to say at the moment, and I'm very glad to have you all heard and seen. And some names are very familiar, other names were new. So it was a great pleasure to be in this webinar together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we
From my
close.
side, thank you very much.
See you in 2 weeks. And thank you to Julio and Elizabeth for assisting from ICAV staff. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Well done.
See you. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.